Hello, credit union executives. Welcome to See You on the Show, where we give you up-to-date information on how you can reduce risk, keep key talent, and take a strategic approach to your personal financial wellness. Hosted by me, Doug English, a certified financial planner and former credit union insider with ACT Advisors. Hi, welcome to the podcast. This is Doug English, and I have some special guests with me today. We were delighted to have noticed an influx of new listeners following our episode featuring Rodney Hood. So we're delighted to have you join us. If you haven't listened to Board Member Hood's episode, please go ahead and do that. It was quite exceptional. He's coming back in August to do a Q&A style session. We're looking forward to that. So if you've been with us for the first time or for a long time, we're extended a warm welcome to you. This podcast is focused on bold leadership in the credit union movement, bold ideas to move the credit union movement upward, to build its strength, and to make sure it exists in perpetuity. So here with me today, I have two certified financial planners from the team at ACT Advisors. One is our editor, and Nicolette Speziale, that's going to be interviewing me and my partner, Wes Johnson, today about the Secure Act and the changes in it that allow credit union leaders to do some pretty interesting things with executive benefits. So with that, Nicolette, over to you.
Hi, Doug. Hi, Wes. Thanks for having me on. I've been working behind the scenes for a while now, and I have to say, I am so excited to be joining in on the discussion today. So let's talk about Secure Act 2.0, which passed in late 2022. I know it had a lot of provisions. What are some of the key changes that credit union leaders should be paying attention to?
The one that I want to talk about the most is the one that is really impacting credit union leaders, which is the change in required minimum distributions. We've all seen the requirement that happens with any pre-tax plan. You get to age 70, it used to be, and then you had to take money out of your plan, and that the amount you would have to take would be fairly small, and that would increase every year for the rest of your life. But over the years, that has changed, and it keeps getting pushed further out. It was 70, and then it went to 72. And now for people that are not yet 72, it is 73 that you have to start these distributions. And for people born after 1960, it's all the way to 75. So because of the particular way executive benefits work in the credit union movement, this additional time before you have to start required minimum distributions is a massive opportunity that has caused our analysis of how much you can get out of credit union executive benefits. We'd proven a few years back that with good layering and risk location and strategy, you could get 25% more out of your executive benefits. Well, now because of the Secure Act, we calculate that you can get 40% more from your executive benefits if you follow some of the strategies we're going to tell you how to do today.
Excellent. When new laws like Secure 2.0 pass, Doug, I know you're examining all the provisions in them, looking for potential planning opportunities, and you're looking at everything through the lens of an executive financial strategist. Now, that term might not be familiar to everyone. Could you shed some light on the role of an EFS and how it differs from an EBS? And maybe talk about what sets it apart from a traditional financial advisor or a financial planner.
Yeah, what we're trying to do with the term executive financial strategist is differentiate the work that we and others in the industry will be doing to help credit union leaders that stands apart from the work the executive benefits folks do and traditional financial advisors. So executive benefits specialists in the first place, they do the work with collateral assignment, 457F and B, and they work with the board and deal with the regulatory issues of compliance. And that's a complex job that sort of stands on its own. That what we do, executive financial strategists do, is to help you take those benefits then and have it make sense the way you put it together with your 401k, with your personal investment accounts, how you decide what to spend first. There's a whole lot to that. And that's where you get that increase in expected value from 25 to 40% more by applying those sorts of strategies. And then your traditional financial advisor, of course, has never seen a collateral assignment or a 457B and isn't really suited to kind of do the strategy part of this. But they may be managing your IRA or a rollover 401k, and that's fine. That doesn't have to be affected. I don't.
All right. So a credit union would partner with an EBS to put the plans in place. And then they would also bring in an executive financial strategist to make sure the plans are integrated and optimized. And that really helps the executive team get the best value from their benefits.
It does. What most folks in credit unions don't understand is if they have a collateral assignment plan, and full disclosure, we are not compensated by anybody that is not a client of ours. The executive benefits firms do not pay us. We do not get kickbacks from anybody. But when we analyze an executive's financial projections, you see that most of you will not pay more than 5% income tax from retirement until mandatory distribution age. And that's because when you're working with your executive benefits specialist, the average replacement ratio, and I know I'm probably jumping ahead, but it's kind of what I do, the replacement ratio that we see the executive benefits design into the plan is at least 60%. So they're having the collateral assignment plan create an income stream for the executive that is targeted at 60% of the final average salary of the executive. Well, that 60% replacement is also tax-free income. So when we take that material and put it into someone's financial plan, most of the time, that income stream alone is sufficient to fill in their budget. So they don't have to take money from other sources. And when that occurs, there's no income tax. So you end up paying literally no tax for sometimes a decade. And in that, there is a massive, massive opportunity to do a whole bunch of other things that I think we're going to talk about.
Yeah, let's get to it. Doug, in your white paper, the 125% Credit Union Executive that you released last year, you presented a case study that really showed executive financial strategy in action. Then Secure 2.0 got passed. As you mentioned earlier, we're going to revisit the 125% executive in light of Secure 2.0. So why don't you dive in and tell us more?
So the first place, what happens in credit unions that causes this, the need for this level of a new role, executive financial strategist, and a different kind of analysis, is the complexity that you see in the credit union executive suite. You start out the job, you get a 401k. These days, it's automatically invested. You're automatically enrolled. It automatically increases for you. So you don't really have to worry about it. And then you work your tail off for a long time and get into the executive suite. And then you have no additional savings ability, right? Because the 401k contribution limit is capped. The same amount that you can put in as an executive is the same amount you were able to put in as a starting employee because it's a federal maximum. Well, so then you work with the executive benefits and you get 457B and 457F and collateral assignment. And each one of these things has different funding frequencies for how often the money goes in. Sometimes some of them are taxable. Sometimes it's tax-free. They have different withdrawal frequencies on the other side and very much different tax structures. And then usually 10 or 15 different investment options per plan. And I think until we kind of did some of this analysis, it was really not clear that you should treat the plans very differently. You should not be doing the same thing across the plans. You should be building a custom investment philosophy around each one after you have figured out when you're going to spend that particular one. So we built a case and we kind of tried to use a middle market credit union executive that was making I'll just kind of give a couple of particulars because this is obviously just an auditory experience. We had a CEO that was making about 300,000. She had a 700,000 in the 401k and another 100,000 in the 457b. Like many credit union executives, they are charitable people. They give $10,000 away to charity. They've got a taxable portfolio of 300,000, and the plan is for this executive to retire at 62. And that's what we often see. That is the number one age folks seem to want to get out of the workforce at is at age 62. When we first engage with a credit union and kind of see what's going on in an executive strategy, you see pretty consistent things. You see the 457B being planned to pay out over 10 years, and usually people keep the 457B actually at higher risk. And the reason is an easy one. It's because it's a smaller account. It doesn't seem like as big a deal to have your 457B go up and down a lot when your 401k is 5 times the value. But it's actually not the right strategy because the 401k usually is going to be the last thing you're going to spend now, where you wouldn't even touch it maybe until 75. So usually that's what you see in the B plan. The 401k is usually into a lifestyle mutual fund. If you're going to retire in 2040, most of the time you'll see an executive with a 2040 fund. Again, in our work, we find that is leaving a huge amount of money on the table because the 2040 fund is being aligned with your retirement date. And that is what the industry teaches us to do. That's the right move for most people, because that's when they're going to start consuming the 401k. But if you've got a suite of executive benefits and you've done your analysis, you're probably going to find you're not going to need that money until you're forced to take that money. And of course, you got to do the math. You got to see if that's the case for each individual. But that's what we usually find. So most of the time, the 401k does not have enough risk in it. And then, as I mentioned earlier, usually you see 60% targeted replacement ratios built into the collateral assignment. And when you put that in your personal budget, for most folks, that's going to cover it for the years between retirement and mandatory distributions. Well, if that's the case and you're retiring and you need to buy health insurance, there's an incredible thing you can do, which is you can potentially qualify, I should say, for Obamacare. Because Obamacare has these income, you got to have a certain amount of income and not too much. And when you do, you get tax credits. The tax credits virtually eliminate the cost of healthcare before age 65. So you can purposely design your income to say, I'm going to pull just the right amount from a 457B or from taxable portfolios. And in doing that, I'm going to be able to qualify for Obamacare and not have to pay much of anything for healthcare between retirement and age 65. So when we build a financial plan and kind of look through where executives typically start out, what we're used to seeing is that our analysis says, hey, it works. We test their resources against their budget and then run a Monte Carlo analysis that's a way of saying, do they have enough? And the answer that we usually get is, yes, of course they have enough because they saved aggressively. They work with their executive benefits specialist and the plan works. And you end up with a value of usually millions of dollars when they have a legacy that goes on to their heirs. But as our work shows that outcomes can be improved in the 40% area using proper strategy and layering of when you take your money. So how it usually works is when an executive retires, the year they retire, the annual leave and sick leave gets paid out. Sometimes the year they retire, sometimes it's the next year if you retire at the end of the year. Well, that's always enough money in the cases that I've seen to take care of that first year's need for income. And then instead of taking the 457B out over a decade, as is usually what the common advice is, we find that it's often optimal to take the 457B out over a single year. And that's because of what, it spikes your tax rate for a single year, but then it allows all these other things that we're going to talk about to happen in future years, and they become much more valuable. Then the year after that, you usually start the collateral assignment distributions, and that goes on. Those three things, for most of the folks we see, are sufficient to cover their income needs all the way until mandatory distributions begin at age 73 or 75. So there's a lot of opportunity in building this all out. Like, you got to do the work and gather the information, put it into software, and get your tax rates projected for your years before retirement and your years in retirement. Before retirement, we often see executives' tax brackets, the effective rates in the 27 to 35% range, and that's just about as high as it gets. So if you project those or your rates before retirement, there's some things that you can look at and should look at. First place, credit union executives are incredibly generous, and we see an amazing amount of charitable giving in the credit union movement. So if that's something that you're doing in the years before retirement, those are, in our projections, those usually are the peak tax years for the rest of your life. If that's the case for you, that means you want those charitable deductions in those years before you retire. So you don't necessarily not want to be able to give money to your charities in your retirement years, but you can use a strategy called a donor advised fund. And a donor advised fund is sort of like a personal charity that you can open up, you can contribute money to in advance. You contribute during your high tax years, and then you distribute the money out to the charity over many years. So what that does is it allows you to have the tax deduction in the high tax year, but yet give the money to the charity over however many years you need to give it to them. So I like to say that credit union executives' superpower that is not known is tax delta. It's the difference between your effective rates before retirement and your effective rates in retirement. Very commonly, that tax delta will be 30%. That's 30% is your opportunity if you use this tax delta properly. So number one is to try to get you the deduction on the charity before you retire, because that's when you've got your very high tax rates. And then when you get into retirement, you're in very low or zero capital gains rates very often. And so that brings up our next subject, which is, in the credit union movement, you see cash payouts that executives get from just bonus plans, or a 457F paying out, or a stay put bonus paying out, or you just constantly save money. So if that's the case and you have a taxable portfolio, again, remember, what's your superpower? Your superpower in the credit union movement is tax delta. So you got to take advantage of that in this space. So if you got a taxable portfolio, you need to use, or you need to at least look at a tax strategy for investing. And we have my partner Wes on the call with us today, and he's going to talk a little bit about the way direct indexing works. Direct indexing is a tax strategy that is run in an investment portfolio, but it is particularly powerful for credit union leaders because of your superpower, right? Which is tax delta, this massive difference between your tax rates. So Wes, if you would, please walk us through how you build and run the direct indexing portfolios and why it's particularly powerful in credit unions.
Sure. So to start with, direct indexing is really only usable in non-qualified accounts, so not retirement accounts. So because everything that happens in those accounts are taxable events, we can do things in those accounts that turn out to help you tax-wise. So what direct indexing is we're just taking an index. Let's just say the S&P 500, and we're going to replicate it using some number of stocks. The S&P 500 contains 500 stocks. We can replicate it using about 200 stocks. So why in the world would you go through all that work of buying 200 individual stocks when you could just buy SPY, the ticker symbol for the S&P 500? And the reason is tax control. So we use software to select the couple hundred stocks that will replicate the S&P 500. And by owning the individual components of the index, when one of them is down, we can sell it and harvest that loss. So kind of the most generic example is, let's say we own Home Depot stock and is one of those 200 stocks. Home Depot stock goes down. It's now below what we paid for it. We sell it, realize that capital loss, and then we immediately replace it with a stock that behaves exactly the same. Let's say, for example, Lowe's stock. So we do that generally on a weekly basis. We'll look at the basket of 200 stocks, and anything that is below what we paid for it, we'll sell it. That's called a tax loss harvest trade, and then we'll replace it with something that keeps the 200 basket of stocks behaving as much like the S&P 500 as possible. And generally, you're going to have the same investment experience as you would if you just bought the index. If the index is down 10, this direct indexing is probably down 10. If the index is up 10, you're probably up 10. So it's the same roller coaster ride. The difference is you're harvesting losses all along the way that you can at some point use to offset gains. So while you're in a high tax bracket, we're going to try to harvest losses. And then when you're retired and your tax bracket drops significantly, we can actually shift that strategy to harvest gains, where your capital gains rate would probably be zero during those years. So we can actually take those gains at that time. But it's really all about tax control. By owning the individual components of the index, we can choose to sell what's at a loss when you need a loss, or we can sell what's at a gain when you need gains.
Thanks, Wes. And I know we're not the only one that does direct indexing. We think we're the only one that's really thought hard about how to take direct indexing and apply it to credit union leaders, because your superpower gives you a unusual situation. We'll see folks outside of the credit union movement with 35% tax rates before retirement. But then when they go into retirement, they are drawing usually from a combination of their taxable and before tax portfolios. We'll see their rates usually go from, again, 35 maybe to something like 15 or 20. You guys will go from 35 to 5. And that's the very unique thing that you need to be planning for and taking advantage of. That's where you get the donor advised fund idea. That's where direct indexing becomes particularly powerful. That's where you're able to kind of control when the income comes in and give you access to the ability to potentially qualify for Obamacare. And then you can fill up tax brackets with Roth conversions. So in the years before age 65, you not need to engineer your income to qualify for those Obamacare credits. So you got to get just the right amount of income to be able to do that. So you probably don't want to do Roth conversions in those years, or at least that's we don't have our executive do that in the example. But then after Medicare age comes along, you can do Roth conversions all the way until required minimum distributions start. And what we do in our example is just we project someone's tax rate so we can see how high a rate of tax they're going to pay once they hit age 75. And then we have the software to fill up the tax bracket below that all the way every year between 65 and 75. And that can add up to be a huge amount of money being converted each year from pre-tax 401k over into the Roth. Yes, you pay tax on the ordinary income rates when you do that, but you can control it. Like you can design how much that is. And in our example, we kept the effective rate for the executive at 10% or below in those years. And then we calculated that person's going to have a 13% rate after they get to be age 75 and never go below that again. So you can do that same kind of thing, but you've got to have your projections built out to be able to tell what's coming so you understand what level of opportunity you have in those pulling the lever on one asset versus the other. The other thing that I'm sure listeners want to hear about is I mentioned the lifestyle fund, the use of a fund for 2030 or 2040 or retirement dates. We commonly see folks do that because those funds are convenient, right? They automatically invest. they automatically get more conservative, but they align the risk of the fund with traditional expectations, which is you retire, you're going to need this. But in most credit union executives' case, if you've got executive benefits, you're going to retire and you're not going to need that 401k, usually for a very long time. So you want to get that calculated, and then at the very least, match the fund you're using, match the design with your planned consumption, not with the date of your retirement. And by doing that, you can have more risk in the 401k. And in most cases, you're going to want to have very little risk in the 457b, because as you know, that's money that is often going to be optimal to pay out in a very short period of time. Nicolette, I hope I covered everything you wanted me to.
You did. That was a lot of information. And I really enjoyed hearing about the tax delta superpower. What you and Wes have detailed today are specialized income timing, risk allocation, and tax planning strategies that credit union executives can put in place right now to boost their benefits. In the case study, can you summarize what the bottom line was for the executive who implemented these strategies?
So when you take and you put all these things together, that's where you get to drive up the expected overall value that an executive receives by 40%. It's the sum of all of these things added together. In our example, you get $1 million, $2 million more in portfolio value by following this process. And of course, that all depends on how much you have now. You save 2 years of healthcare expenses by being careful about what kind of income you take in those years. You save a whole ton of money on income taxes because you do Roth conversions in very low years. And then you save some more money on the donor advised fund strategy because you're taking advantage of your tax delta, funding a donor advised fund in the high years, and then giving it to charity in the lower tax years.
Thanks, Doug. That was fantastic information. For credit union leaders interested in executive financial strategy, what steps can they take or what resources can they explore to learn more?
Our outcome is to strengthen the credit union movement. We want to boost the benefits. We want to help the entire credit union movement to get more from their executive benefits by up to 40% through this kind of work. So it is a lot, right? I just blew through years of work that we did figuring that out. We need to provide this education over and over and over again at league meetings, at industry events, at executive benefits companies meetings. We've already been doing some of that. You'll see that on our social media. And we offer to do that to your leagues, to your chapter meetings, to your credit union industry events. I want to be out to teaching the industry how to make more of their benefits. We'll also be doing web events to try to get folks more information about that. So our mission is to make sure that we are able to strengthen the movement. And in order to do that, we've got to help you be able to take advantage of these strategies. So if you have connections with your league leaders, and I know you do, please send an email to doug@act-advisors.com along with an introduction to your league folks. We are specifically on the approved list as a non-competitor by CUNA Mutual since we don't sell any executive benefits products. And that means that we are eligible to teach at your events, and we'd sure love to do that. Well, thank you, Nicolette and Wes, for joining me on the podcast today. Hopefully our listeners are starting to get some of the ideas for how powerful the executive benefits are that we have in the credit union movement, and how if you combine them in the right way, you can get so much more out. We're here to get that information out. We believe strongly in the good that is done by the credit union movement, and we're here to help. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your help, and we will look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Thanks, Doug.
Hey, Doug, thanks for having me on your show as well.
That's all the insider credit union knowledge we have for this episode. Are you enjoying the conversation? Be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts with other credit union leaders by leaving us a review. See you next time on See You on the Show.
The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual security. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. Indexes are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly.